Hello, I'm Miyun from the Department of American Cuisine. Today is May 29th and let's start today's American stock news. Today as well, I, Miyun, will deliver the news that keeps American stock investors informed without any changes. Today is Thursday. Personally, on Thursdays, I have a chat with Representative Kim In-jung on Choice Talk, and that's why the news is a bit late today. Recently, during the recording, Representative Kim In-jung waited for me until I finished my news and then started, so today I will try to finish the news quickly so I can click the recording link on time. And about 6 hours from now, Representative Kim In-jung will be coming to the Miso channel for a video. It's a video related to ASML that will be released this morning. If you are personally interested in topics that I don't often cover, I think it would be good for you to check out this video at least once. Through this video, you can check out Representative Kim In-jung's rare insights, so I think it will be helpful for many people. And also there are some topics that I personally deal with. I usually cover about 19 stocks, and since I only provide content related to these specific stocks, I think this will be a valuable opportunity for many of you to hear new insights about a global blue chip stock like ASML from various people. Now let's get started with today's United States stock market news for May 29th. Today as well, I'll keep the United States stock market highlights brief and concise. Yesterday, the overall trend was that the blue chips were supporting the S&P 500, and there were more stocks that fell than those that rose. However, the bullish parts were not very clear, and overall, the red color was quite dominant. But at least the red wasn't very bright. Overall, it was a rather dull shade of red. The reason is that many people already knew and expected that Nvidia's earnings results would be announced soon. So, in the futures market, many investors seem to have made their decisions after seeing Nvidia's earnings results. We can say that there were a lot of investors waiting for this. Recently, there have been several investment concerns. Because of these concerns, the stock market hasn't been performing well, and as a result, the bond market is also not doing well, which is having a negative impact on the United States stock market as well. In addition, due to the financial situation in Japan, there are even concerns about the possibility of an energy trade imbalance. So, as a result, investors who had been feeling good about the market recently are starting to get nervous and are selling off their assets. The results of the American Association of Individual Investors survey have just been updated. Now, only 32.9% of investors believe that the United States stock market will rise over the next 6 months, showing a sharp drop in optimism. Last week, it was 37.7%. So in just 1 week, a lot of investors have lost their positive outlook. That's what the numbers show. Now, 41.9% of investors expect the United States stock market to be lower in 6 months, so a negative outlook is being presented. Next week, we'll have to see how things change, but recently investors' psychology has been swinging too much between optimism and pessimism, so it seems necessary to keep monitoring the situation. Next, we have the results of the United States tapping. Recently, all 3 major indices showed a similar downward trend. The Dow Jones was down 0.58%, the S&P 500 was down 0.56%, and the Nasdaq also fell by 0.51%. So that's how it is. Overall, the United States market declined. But there were even more stocks in the top performing sectors that also fell. First of all, some stocks did rise. Broadcom performed the best, going up by 1.6%. Next, Trade Desk rose by 1.16%. Bitcoin was the third best performer, rising by 0.54%. Now there are 10,840 coins in total. Palantir also saw a slight positive gain of 0.3%. Lastly, Meta ended with a plus of 0.2%. All sectors were in the red, but some sectors managed to avoid a complete downturn. Most of the declines were recorded in relatively small drops. So, yesterday, most of the stocks closed lower. At the very end of the list are MicroStrategy minus 214 and ETFs that use Bitcoin leverage. B2 dropped by 5.4%, but except for these kinds of stocks, most stocks were able to maintain a sideways trend. That's how you should look at it. And I think some people were a bit disappointed. The original value of the dividend yield is very good. If you look at the example, 3.45%, and if you look at Nvidia, 5.56%. And besides that, Celestica Plus is up 3.71% and Vista is up 3.57%. In the case of companies like Credo Technology, they're showing an impressive increase of 6.2%. Now, the reason why the stock prices are soaring like this is because both companies posted strong earnings. Now, today I'll explain these two positive factors in detail so you can understand the broadcast better. Now, let's start with the first prepared article for today. I will briefly explain the two reasons why the United States stock market selection is showing a sharp rise. There's a graph here, but this isn't the stock market. It's actually the bond market. Right now, the value of the dollar is also rising sharply. Recently, the dollar has been rising, and the United States stock market is also soaring. Let's take a look at the reasons behind this. There is a federal court in the United States, and it has ruled former President Trump guilty of illegally concealing hush money payments. In addition, on Thursday, United States Treasury yields are rising. And because of India's positive economic performance, investment sentiment is also improving. The first was Nvidia's performance, and the second was the unexpectedly strong performance of the Trump administration. Regarding the issue, it became major news, and as you can see, this is how it turned out. After the announcement, the S&P 500 and Nasdaq 100 futures are showing gains of 1.6% and 2% respectively. The Trump administration has already announced that this is a temporary measure. And after seeing the easing of tariffs, the dollar has weakened, and this part is also quite positive. If the value of the yen rises and the value of the dollar falls, it's not because the yen carry trade is being cleared, but rather because we made such a policy decision. If you see this kind of trend, that's the reason. As a result, the dollar index has risen to its highest level in about a week. At the same time, the United States 10-year Treasury yield is showing an upward trend of 3 percentage points. This time, after President Trump's April 2nd announcement, global financial markets are providing temporary guidance for traders who are confused by the volatile market. The highest level of tariffs ever and the president's continued tough stance are very concerning. So now, investors are feeling uneasy as the United States-China trade war intensifies. Well, that's the current situation. Until now, investing in United States stocks has been considered relatively safe, but now people are starting to think that United States stocks are no longer safe. Even the perception that if things get worse, the United States market will still be okay is fading, and the environment is not as favorable as it used to be. So this time, the situation got even worse when Trimble's executive was convicted of illegal trading. If you look at it this way, you can see how things have changed. Now let's take a look at the experts' opinions. Goldman Sachs Group's Asia-Pacific stock strategist Timothy Moger is coming out. This could be interpreted as a strong signal. This is what Timothy Moger of Goldman Sachs meant by a strong signal. But he said that this is not the final verdict. Especially, the Trump administration has several different measures it can use to maintain tariffs. So we need to take a closer look at the situation. It's too early to judge the impact, and that's why we're talking about it like this. Well then, who are the three panelists from the United States International Trade Commission? The panel ruled that President Trump had properly exercised his authority under the Emergency Safeguard Law, and that most of the process was legitimate. That was their decision. The court also gave the administration 10 days to implement the ruling, but did not issue a specific order requiring the government to refund the tariffs. In the end, the final decision on this important case could go all the way to the United States Supreme Court. That's what we can expect. Now, let's take a closer look at the details. This ruling is about the Colorado ballot regarding Trump, and it seems to be about removing him from the ballot, which is about 10% of the issue. It is said that the tariffs apply to goods from China, Canada, and Mexico, as well as to goods that are considered to be from China, and that this is being implemented in a comprehensive way. It says that tariffs imposed under Section 232 and Section 301, as well as tariffs on aluminum and automobiles, are not affected by this ruling. Hoju National Bank's Sydney branch's small electric car is coming out on the road with a curtain. I heard that more detailed information is needed. He says it's difficult to make a prediction, whether there is a clear improvement or if it's just a temporary phenomenon and the situation will soon be maintained is important. If the tariffs are actually implemented within a few months, there could be an impact. So is there a provisional disposition order in the agreement? Regarding the global ban on trimphone, it is likely to be temporarily suspended according to the court's order. That means, as the appeal process proceeds, the relevant measures will be suspended, so we need to check this part. Now, on Thursday, the dollar strengthened by up to 0.4%. The dollar index has been rising sharply due to concerns about United States assets and the possibility of a prolonged United States interest rate hike, and after hitting a high in February, it has fallen more than 7%. As a result, the value of the dollar, which had been falling, started to rise again. This part can be interpreted as a temporary rebound. This is different from Nvidia Chief Executive Officer John Soon-hyuk. While presenting the previous sales performance, Jensen Huang, Chief Executive Officer of Nvidia, reassured investors concerned about the Chinese economy, saying that the artificial intelligence computing market is still experiencing fundamental growth. As for Nvidia's performance, I will explain the details based on the articles that have been separately published. Anyway, in this way, with Nvidia's solid performance and the news of the second Trump trial, United States stocks are showing a sharp rise. This is how the market can change so quickly. This time, it's about the court's ruling. I will deliver more detailed information separately through individual postings to everyone. I've developed a new series for Mijunon All-in-One members, and this is the Mijunon podcast. Many people are curious about how the Mijunon podcast will proceed. If you check it out directly at the end of today's broadcast, I think you'll like it. Next, I'll analyze today's broadcast highlight, Nvidia's interview report, so you can understand it better. For those of you who are still confused about Nvidia's earnings results, I'm going to do my best to explain it clearly while watching this broadcast. Looking at Nvidia's earnings results in the first quarter, their earnings per share came out to 0.81. Compared to the previous quarter, Nvidia added 6 cents additionally, and if you look at their sales, they recorded 44.06 billion, which is a 69% increase compared to last year. Also, compared to the previous quarter, they added $8 billion additionally. So it was an outstanding earnings result, as you can see. First, let me summarize the actual announcement for the first quarter of fiscal year 2026. They announced the results for the first quarter of fiscal year 2026, which ended on April 27, 2025. The results show sales of $44.1 billion. This is a 12% increase compared to the same period last year. Other industries usually see about 12% growth compared to the previous year, but Nvidia achieved 12% growth compared to the previous quarter. Compared to the same period last year, they recorded an impressive 69% increase. Especially important is the data center business. The data center division recorded sales of $39.1 billion, which is a 10% increase compared to the previous quarter and a remarkable 73% increase compared to the same period last year. Overall sales grew, but the growth in data center sales was even better. There was also some bad news about products that didn't do well. This is the part we're already familiar with. It's about the H20. On April 9, 2025, the United States government received information that a license would be required for the export of the H20 product to the Chinese market. And because of these new regulations, the supply of the H20 product became limited. Nvidia had to process the costs related to the inventory and purchase obligations of the H20, which is worth about $4.5 billion all at once in one quarter. Now, this explanation is easy to understand, right? $4.5 billion was included, so if you look at it this way, it makes sense. So in the end, if you exclude these inventory costs, that's what happens. Nvidia's first quarter year-on-year sales growth was recorded at 71.3%, and the net profit margin was as high as $9.6 billion. But here, the $4.5 billion in expenses that were incurred before this measure have not been included yet, so in reality, this hasn't been reflected in the financial statements yet. So the actual results that were announced reflect this. So as a result, Kangijun's total sales profit fell below 65%, dropping from the previous 70% to 60%. But this is non-generally accepted accounting principles. Non-generally accepted accounting principles standards recorded 61%. And then the net profit margin also dropped to $0.76 for Kangijun. And for non-generally accepted accounting principles, it was $0.81. So you can see it like this. In summary, it showed the following trend. The architecture was created for the purpose of artificial intelligence recommendation. And now our main title is artificial intelligence. It's all about running GPUs. Our innovative blockchain, MVL72 Artificial Intelligence Supercomputer, has entered full-scale production in collaboration with system manufacturing companies and cloud service providers. Now, since production is in full swing, don't worry and just place your order. And secondly, Nvidia, their global dominance in artificial intelligence infrastructure, is incredibly strong. The production of artificial intelligence semiconductors has increased tenfold in just 1 year, and as artificial intelligence agents become more common, the demand for artificial intelligence computing will accelerate even further. Now, the important examples from both sides are coming up. The first is recommendation. The number of recommendation tokens has increased tenfold in just 1 year. This means that people like us, many people and companies are continuously using artificial intelligence, whether it's on ChatGPT or Gemini. Whenever we ask a question, tokens keep being generated. That's what this means. So, as more and more people use artificial intelligence like this and ask questions, every time that happens, NVIDIA as graphics processing unit usage increases. That's how you can understand it. And another thing is, it's artificial intelligence intensive. Now, things like just automating tasks and making your day easier have become more common and accepted. Many companies are already using artificial intelligence agents. As this culture of assigning tasks to artificial intelligence agents becomes more mainstream, the barriers to artificial intelligence computing will continue to decrease. More and more individuals and businesses will use artificial intelligence agents, and I think it would be good for you to understand this trend. And ultimately, we are surrounded by artificial intelligence in our daily lives. All the countries around the world are recognizing artificial intelligence as an essential infrastructure, just like electricity and the internet. Now, just like we can't live without electricity or the internet, it seems like we won't be able to live without artificial intelligence either. Nvidia is at the center of this rapid change, providing the essential computing power that supports the world's major companies. And the important thing is, the first half is the past, which I explained on another broadcast, and what's really good about the first half is that you already know it. The important thing is, from the second half onward, what will happen, and this is the key point. For fiscal year 2026, second half sales are expected to be $456 billion according to market forecasts, but are projected to be $450 billion. Therefore, it fell slightly short of market expectations. That's why it's a bit lacking, and the reason the stock price is going down is because the guidance was lowered. Previously, due to recent export controls, there was a concern that the sales reduction of about 8 trillion won for the H20 could have a negative impact. So if H20 sales are included in the contract, you have to add another $8 billion here. That's the explanation. Therefore, in the market, although the pace of sales has slowed down a bit compared to before, the actual performance is still very strong. That's the assessment. And then, regarding Kang, the total sales share is now not 60% but 71.8%, and it is expected to reach 72%. This positive outlook was also highlighted. Now let's move on to the next company. By the end of this year, the company could achieve a gross profit margin of up to 70%. So in this period, the gross profit margin was below 60%, but in the next period, it will be between 71 and 72, and if things go well, it could reach up to 75. Since margin kept coming up, I think it's safe to say that this message was delivered. Now next, the main additional announcements have been summarized here. Most of them are things we already know well. First, data center sales increased by 73% compared to the same period last year. Second, they announced the construction of a new factory and a partnership to produce artificial intelligence supercomputers in the United States. This part is because of Timpel, and that's why Timpel wants to enter the United States directly, build factories, and produce locally. Let's check this content again. Third, they unveiled the NVIDIA Blackwell Ultra for artificial intelligence model acceleration and expansion, and also introduced the NVIDIA Dynamo. If you look, you'll see that they announced it in front of a large audience. Fourth, they once again confirmed their partnership with Hume for building artificial intelligence factories in Saudi Arabia. They unveiled Abu Dhabi's next-generation artificial intelligence infrastructure cluster, Stargate United Arab Emirates. Next, they announced that Boston will be coming, and Boston, as well as a plan to cooperate with the Taiwanese government to build an artificial intelligence factory supercomputing center, was also revealed. Next is Game. In the past, NVIDIA was a company that made GPUs for games, so games weren't a complete focus, but recently, if you look at the sales by sector, the gaming sector has recorded the highest figures in history, reaching $3.8 billion. Compared to the same period last year, it increased by 42%, so you can see that this sector continues to grow. Lastly, it's expected that NVIDIA's processor and artificial intelligence-based deep learning supersampling will be applied to Nintendo Switch 2. The announcement will also be made soon. That's all for the analysis after looking at NVIDIA's earnings report. So from now on, I'll try to deliver additional key points from this conference call in a concise way so that many of you can understand. So, what did Jensen Huang, the Chief Executive Officer, say during the conference call with analysts? He was asked whether it would be possible to produce a new chip that could be sold in China. That was a very important question, and Jensen Huang responded to it. Jensen Huang said that even if Nvidia lowers the performance of the H20 again, it will be difficult to create a useful product. However, he added that the company is considering developing a new product exclusively for the Chinese market. Jensen Huang said that Nvidia is currently in the brainstorming stage for this idea, and there are no concrete plans yet. It will take some time, but this is how it could be possible. And Jensen Huang explained this through a conference call. He also urged the Chinese government to allow the supply of the chip to the Chinese market again, strengthening his appeal in this way. And is there no such possibility? In the artificial intelligence field, Nvidia cannot maintain its global leadership. The United States could fall behind China. This is the message he delivered. The rapid growth of China's artificial intelligence acceleration market, which is expected to reach $50 billion, raises concerns about its direct impact. This could undermine the competitiveness of American companies and shift influence to China and other foreign economies around the world. So, with such a huge scale, China is the world's second largest artificial intelligence market. If we lose access to this market, it will be a big loss. As a result, American companies will be pushed out of the economy. This is the message that President Trump delivered, and this is how you should see it. If Nvidia is receiving strong support in the Chinese market, on the other hand, policy changes could open up additional markets. This issue is something we discussed a lot last week. Recently, President Joe Biden of the United States visited Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern countries and announced a large-scale artificial intelligence project. And this is about the Biden administration's policy to restrict artificial intelligence technology access in certain regions. Therefore, although the situation remains unfavorable for China, new business opportunities are emerging in the Middle East, which had been completely blocked by the previous administration. Plus, minus, that's how you should look at it. And what about the overall outlook? He is also expected to announce similar plans in other countries, and he was asked about this as well. He delivered very positive news about this. He said he plans to visit Europe next week. And during an interview with Bloomberg Television, he said that he plans to visit France, the United Kingdom, Germany, and Belgium. And then he once again emphasized that all countries recognize part of Ukraine's sovereignty through official communications and diplomatic channels. Now let's wrap up with a brief summary. This time, through the earnings conference call, we were able to identify the qualitative signs of the two companies. Now, let's talk about the short-term signs. Next week, John Soon-hyung will visit Europe. That's how it turned out. It was difficult for us to predict the magnitude of the contract signed during the Middle East visit. However, regarding Nvidia, there is a possibility that more positive news will come out next week, so expectations are rising. And recently, from a more long-term perspective, the biggest concern in the Chinese market is the United States government's regulatory issues. Jensen Huang recently asked the United States government through a conference call to allow them to supply chips to the Chinese market again, making this kind of request. So, if the United States regulations on the Chinese market are partially eased as promised, Nvidia will be the company that benefits the most. Right now, even though the Chinese market is blocked, Nvidia is the company that is showing these kinds of results. So, if by any chance the relationship between the United States and China improves and the Chinese market opens up, if that happens, Nvidia could soar once again. That's how much potential there is, and that's why people are paying so much attention. Now, next we'll move on to Tesla. Tesla's stock price dropped by about 1.65%, but if you look at the closing price, you can see that it rebounded by about 2.49% after hours. Well, there are a couple of reasons for that. There are two main factors. Now, through today's broadcast, I'll briefly explain these two positive factors and then move on. The first positive factor is related to the interest rate cut. On June 12th, so in about 2 weeks, there was news that Robotaxi services would be launched, which is very positive. Bloomberg reported that Tesla has set June 12th as the target date to launch its Robotaxi service in Austin. That's how the news was delivered. With high expectations, Tesla is preparing for the launch, but currently there are no vehicles on the roads of Austin operating as robotaxis. Instead, only a Model Y sport utility vehicle with Tesla's engineer in the driver's seat for testing purposes has been seen driving around. Is Tesla an electric vehicle manufacturer? The latest version of the fully autonomous driving software, which we call full self-driving unsupervised. So it's a new software that doesn't require human supervision. This system is expected to be implemented as a direct robotaxi service with Model Y vehicles in 10 to 20 major cities. That's how you should see it. This initial deployment won't cover the entire city. It will be limited to specific safe areas in Austin. Now, this kind of gradual approach prioritizes safety above all else. Before expanding the scale, Tesla is closely monitoring performance. If you look at it this way, does it seem like Tesla is being cautious? By gradually increasing the number of vehicles, they plan to expand up to 1,000 units within a few months. This is the approach they're taking, and in the future, they plan to expand their services to different regions with various setups, such as Los Angeles and San Francisco. Tesla's Robotaxi will, at least until early 2026, use a specially designed vehicle announced by Cyberback. And until then, it will use the existing consumer model. So before the transition to Cyberback in 2026, it will be Model Y. That's how you should see it. Will the Robotaxi launch successfully in Austin? It is expected that by supplementing the report from the second half of this year, the regulatory process can be completed. So this is something we can look forward to. If the Robotaxi is launched successfully, analysts expect that the number of Robotaxi orders could expand to hundreds of thousands, and that this will play a key role in calculating the value of Robotaxi-related vehicles. Currently, in the upper part of the market, there are no sales or revenue being reflected yet for Robotaxi. So, if we see a successful launch as promised, and if that happens, many analysts will be busy quickly reflecting this part in their actual forecasts. That's why there's so much anticipation. What about cases like Goldman Sachs? If we say they announced it in January this year, they plan to start commercial operations in the second half of 2026, so it will be around 2027. They expect to generate about $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion in sales, and this is their forecast. And the company operating Cashewwood, they made this announcement in February this year. By 2030, they expect to generate about $2.4 trillion in sales, which is an enormous amount. If that happens, the industry value could reach about $34 trillion. This is the forecast they announced. Now, if you look at the slide on the screen, in the case of a slide like this, if Tesla is able to realize this roadmap, they could create at least $1 trillion in value. That's how they explained it. Currently, Tesla's industry value is about $1 trillion, so if it doubles, that's what they're talking about. So with the launch of the Robotaxi, the stock price could also double. That's how we can interpret it. And then ARK Invest comes up again. What does Cathie Wood say about early 2025? Tesla's Robotaxi business could push its stock price up to $2,600 within 5 years. This is the previous outlook that has come out. So, if it can be launched this successfully, what about Tesla's Robotaxi business? They are securing solid sales capabilities, and Tesla also has the potential to greatly increase its corporate value. This is how we can evaluate it. However, there are still uncertainties, such as whether there will actually be demand and sales, the pace of technological development, the market's competitive landscape, and regulatory changes. These factors are very important. Because of these various factors, the results could be different. Therefore, the future has not been decided yet, and this is an area where we need to keep an eye on. So we need to pay attention to Tesla's stock price as well. Rather than just a simple sense of anticipation, I personally think it's important to respond flexibly according to the ongoing news. I will also briefly go over the second topic related to Tesla. Elon Musk has announced that he will establish a business alliance with the German government. He said he will no longer work for the United States government and that he will focus on Tesla. That was the message he delivered. Elon Musk officially ended his business with the United States government, and he expressed his gratitude for being invited to the meeting with President Trump, despite his abrupt departure. Musk, after the Trump administration launched the Department of Government Efficiency in January as part of its efforts to streamline the federal government, now refers to it in English as the Department of Government Efficiency. Here, by taking the initials, it becomes DOGE, which is pronounced as Doge. As a special government official, Musk can serve in the administration for up to 130 days a year without being a full-time government employee. At the end of May, after the Trump administration appointment, the 130-day period begins. So now the allotted time is all used up, and that's how it works. We have confirmed the resignation of the White House official who requested anonymity, and the process of selecting a successor will begin soon. We are delivering this message. The world's richest man, Mayosuke, has already delivered the message that he will focus on his role as chief executive officer of the startup xAI, which is known for its Tesla SpaceX artificial intelligence technology. Previously, Mayosuke made this announcement during an interview with Fox Digital News. The Trump administration worked on an initiative for the first 100 days to promote innovation in daily life and throughout the country. So, I didn't have any experience in a different industry or anything like that. For the first 100 days, that's just how it was. Therefore, interpreting the fact that Musk, who was so devoted to government work, returned to business right away as something negative is overly simplistic. Especially, there was an incident right before the Robotaxi service launch on June 12th. Therefore, it can be judged that Tesla's return to the main business is highly positive. Now, there are many legal issues arising from the government's business activities in Moscow, but Tesla's industry status and the positive impact on the stock price are being highlighted. We keep hearing about this so-called overhang, but now, will this overhang finally be resolved? Therefore, there could still be a lot of negative impact on investor sentiment, and it seems like the valuation could fluctuate like this. So what is the content that was prepared for today's last segment? Earlier, as I mentioned, I brought the latest series meme podcast from the All-in-One members to share with everyone. So what is the topic of today's podcast? Yesterday, there was some big breaking news. The United States Supreme Court's Trump-related immunity ruling is unconstitutional. Now, regarding this, let's talk about what details we need to pay attention to and go over the specifics together. That's all for today's broadcast. Until the very end, thank you to everyone who stayed with us and listened sincerely. Recently, thanks to the influence of artificial intelligence, the world is changing rapidly. I am doing my best to study, research, and evolve so that I won't be left behind by these changes. Since this is still the early stage for many of you, please don't be too impatient. If you keep participating little by little and continue to build up your experience, I think good results will come. Since these are new attempts, there may be some awkward or incomplete aspects at first, but I will do my best to keep improving and show you a more polished version over time. All of us will keep fighting together until the day we drive out the American invaders. Please be happy. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello to all Reason One family members. Today I have prepared some really important news for all Reason One family members. Yes, hello. We have some important news about Trim Firm. There are rumors that this policy will be lifted soon. This is completely breaking news.
Yes, it's really big news.
Today, the article that Johi brought is from Bloomberg and CNBC. The content of the ruling from the United States International Trade Commission is at the core of this.
Now,
So, if you look at this ruling carefully, you can see why it's so important and why it's getting so much attention. Let's take a closer look together and see which points we should focus on. Wow, this really feels like a huge deal, yes.
That's right. Let's listen carefully one more time. Woo-sung?
Shall we take a closer look at what happened specifically? Yes. In that context, the United States International Trade Court's ruling is at the center of attention.
It was unanimous.
President Trump made an announcement last April regarding the broad interpretation of the relevant clause, calling most of it illegal and immediately suspending its enforcement.
That's right. To put it simply, it meant that the basic tariffs would be applied to all products around the world, and that additional tariffs would be imposed on certain countries like China. That was the content.
And there was also something related to Putin.
Yes, that's right. Tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico were also mentioned. All these things were included in this announcement. So,
That's right, but that doesn't mean all the tariffs are gone. I heard that things like steel and cars are different.
yes, that's a very important point. Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. This is the part that is applied for national security reasons.
And the Customs Act.
Section 301 is in response to unfair trade practices. So, the tariffs imposed under these provisions are not directly related to this ruling.
This ruling?
The Trump administration called it the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and this only applies to tariffs imposed as a result of that event.
Oh, that International Emergency Economic Powers Act, was that law the core issue? The administration argued that unless the counterpart was a hostile country, or unless the transaction was suspicious in terms of national security, it was difficult to apply this law. That's right.
The administration's argument was that, but the court's ruling was different.
How was it different?
The law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act is a general law, so it does not specifically restrict or prohibit the president's authority in that regard.
That's not what the law was originally intended for.
Yes, originally this law was created as a limited measure to protect the nation's assets in situations like war or national emergency, such as when a hostile country threatens or blocks certain financial transactions. The National Assembly's long-standing custom and the principle that the National Assembly cannot interfere in such a specific matter. There is no precedent for this, and the National Assembly has no authority over it.
That's right. Especially regarding the tariff issue. Did the Supreme Court ever directly address it? Yes.
That part is also quite important. The court pointed out the non-commercial nature, and in this case, it was about drug transactions. This and the actual actions taken, the details about the legal goods, and the direct connection between these two matters. These are called nexus in English. The court questioned whether these were sufficient.
The connection is insufficient.
Yes, that's right. The question is whether imposing tariffs on legal goods can actually prevent illegal smuggling that bypasses the economy. The court said that this connection is not clear.
Yes, that's right.
That's true. The government said in the retrial process that the purpose of this tariff was to protect domestic industries from different countries, and that's why it was recognized as a legitimate trade measure.
Oh, really? So they admitted it was to put pressure on other countries? The Supreme Court's logic seems pretty clear, but did this ruling actually have any real impact on the economy, especially on the market? So, as soon as the verdict was announced, did the market react right away? Yes.
That's right. The market responded immediately. According to CNBC, the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose by 500 points or so.
500 points.
Yes, even on Bloomberg, I saw a segment about American stock investors giving gifts and talking about Kangse. I saw it like this. If the interest in ARM is confirmed, the cost of listing will increase, and the uncertainty that existed before will be resolved, so there are expectations that the situation will improve. Leah.
Did the market react right away? How did the related industries respond? Of course, there was an immediate reaction.
It was as expected. At that time, the White House spokesperson raised his voice, but it wasn't just about criticizing the court's decision. They strongly criticized the ruling, saying it was not just a matter of national abnormality, but a serious misjudgment.
Did they criticize the judges?
Yes, and they also said that unelected officials had made a decision about the national emergency, which was a very unusual situation.
But this isn't the end here. The legal battle will continue.
That's right. As soon as the Ministry of Justice announced the verdict, they immediately said they would appeal to the appellate court. That's how they expressed their intention. Yes.
Right away?
Yes, so this case could go all the way up to the Supreme Court, so we have to watch its progress. Currently, the district court has not issued an injunction, so for now, nothing has been decided in that regard. Leah.
That's a very important ruling. This is simply a matter of personal interest, but the Supreme Court made a big move regarding the president's alleged criminal acts beyond this. There is meaning in that as well.
That's correct. This ruling is not just about the Trump administration's economic policy, but more importantly, it shows that when a president tries to use such extraordinary circumstances to bypass Congress, the judiciary can play a role in checking that power. That's the key message here.
That's right. So, from now on, not only the prices of imported goods, but also various sectors, such as international relations and the overall economy, will need to be continuously monitored for their impact. Yes.
To sum up, that's how it is. The United States District Court ruled that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act law, which the Trump administration used as a basis for its broad interpretation, is illegal. That's how the lawsuit was filed, and that's what happened. The market reacted positively at first, but the legal battle is expected to continue as the government appeals. So this isn't just a simple economic policy issue, but rather something we need to look at as part of the bigger picture of President Trump's overall strategy, right?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.